So welcome everybody to a program that is a joint program between the LGBTQ Plus Resource Center and Student Achievement Services, as well as our entire division, Academic Support for Inclusive Excellence. This is the second in our series, QTPOC Students Navigating PWIs, and today we're going to be raising Latinx and Hispanic voices. Thought we would just start by all of us introducing ourselves. I will go first. My name is Liz Cannon. I direct our LGBTQ Plus Resource Center in Teaching Women and Gender Studies. My pronouns are A, M, and airs. I identify as queer, bi, and genderqueer. I'll turn it over to my cohort, who is also helping me with this, Byron Adams.
Thanks, Liz. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Byron Adams, pronouns he, him, his. I am the director of our Multicultural Student Achievement Services within the Division of Academic Support of Inclusive Excellence, and I will be co-facilitating with Dr. Cannon today. Welcome.
And Letty.
Hi, my name is Letty Diaz. I identify as non-binary / gender fluid. My pronouns are they, them, their. I have been a student at UWO off and on since 2017. Currently off for things I'll talk about actually in this panel. So yeah, and I have cats.
I love cats. How many cats?
Well, I have just the one, Luna, but my roommates have 4, so together we have 5.
Nice.
It's a lot of cats.
So this one you will probably hear a lot. This is Storm. She's currently in heat, so yeah.
Very good. So were you going to start us off, Byron, or was I?
I think you were going to kick it off.
All right. So our first actual question for you, we're curious, what was your reaction when you were asked to be on this panel?
First off, I clearly look like this. So even though I am Latinx and Hispanic, I did not feel like I really qualified to talk about race. Given that because of my skin being lighter, I don't actually experience racism on the level I think that this panel is aiming for. I mean, I'm never going to be discriminated against for my skin tone. But at the same time, I know that at UWO, the amount of people who are both a ethnic identity and queer and trans is so small that I knew that I'm one of the few people that could talk about this intersection. So I'm going to try and do my best, but I do want to stress that my experience is going to be like super light compared to the experience of Black and brown students at UWO. So I just really want to stress that because I have privilege. So the things that I'm going to be able to talk about are not going to be as deep into, the topic of racism because I can't speak on that. So my first reaction was kind of just, I don't think I'm the right person to talk about it, but then if I don't talk about it, there's going to be no conversation at all. So, yeah.
And we can't thank you enough for agreeing to come and speak with us today.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
Mike, Byron.
Thank you. One for the mute jar. So, Letty, we're going to assume that you classify, or maybe we should just add, do you classify UWO as a predominantly white school?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And so, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I was going to say, so what do you think are the defining characteristics of UWO that make you say that? Or is it just beyond the racial demographics of the student body? So how are you?
It is beyond the racial demographic of the students. And the reason I say this is because even the majority of the teachers that I've come into contact with are white. So in classes, like even the Spanish classes I've taken at UWO, a lot of my teachers have been white. And a lot of the history classes, for those of you who don't know, I was a international studies and a history major with minors in Spanish, French, and Latin American studies. So a lot of my classes were very Latinx centered, but the majority of my teachers even then were white. And as a result, when certain conflicts would come up between me and the few other students of color and the majority white student population, because the teachers are white, I feel like they weren't able to really grasp the situation of what was going on between, for example, the white students learning for the first time that, Columbus didn't kill all the Tainos, or that, they're still learning that America was colonized, that it was taken, that, all of these things that students like myself who are indigenous or are from an ethnic group that is not white, we've all known this. So I feel like, not to discredit any of the teachers, they worked really hard for their degrees, but there's just certain things that are going on in the classroom that they cannot see and cannot control because they are not of color. And I think that maybe if the student body were more diverse and the faculty more diverse, we could facilitate these conversations better. Because from my experience and from the experience of some of my Latinx peers, sometimes being in these classes where the teacher is white, the students are white, it feels like a battleground. And that to me is the defining characteristic of a predominantly white institution. Because there can be students of color, but we're still very aware that it's a white battleground.
Interesting metaphor that you use of battleground. Something that as teachers we try so hard never to do, and obviously not as successfully as we hope. Very good metaphor. One thing I forgot to mention, if anybody in the audience wants to join through the chat or have a question as we go, please do. We hope to have this as a conversation more than a strict presentation, and we enjoy engagement. So I'm curious, Letty, then, when you first got to campus, were you able to bring your whole self to the table, including your sexuality and your gender, maybe religion, culture, ability, status, in all spaces?
I think specifically me, with being a mixed person, I've spent my entire life code switching, and I continue to do that at UWO. So if I am around students who are like me, who are Latinx, I tend to be able to be more presently Latinx in conversations. If I am in, a queer space, I tend to be able to bring more of my queer self. And in certain situations, I do get to bring both. For example, right now, I get to talk both about my queer identity and my Latinx identity. When I go to SOUL meetings, Student Org of Latinos, I get to kind of be the token queer person and vice versa. So I do get a bit of a crossover, but as far as being able to be wholly myself as I am, to the fullest extent, the place that I felt I could do that most was alone in my dorm room. And that's not to discredit UWO. There are a lot of spaces at UWO. When you come from so many different types of backgrounds and you have that intersectionality, finding other people who kind of fit all of these different groups that you're a part of, it becomes harder. So like I get to UWO, I have to find someone who is either Latinx but has been around white people, because so have I, is queer, is also disabled, and I'm also alternative, I'm goth. So there's just a whole lot of things that come into being able to be your full self. And I think anyone who code switches a lot knows that you kind of have to pick and choose who you get to be in certain situations.
So that's good. So as a follow-up to that response, so from your first experience to how you're experiencing now today, is it pretty much the same?
I would say, yeah. I definitely have found my niche spaces at UWO. I definitely have made a space for myself as well. A lot of people know me for performing drag, for being a dancer. I'm known as, the queer Latinx. So Liz came to me for this. Again, when I go to Seoul, I'm known as like the queer Latinx. So I kind of have edged out a space of my own, but I definitely still am having to do that same code switching from day one. And it's kind of just an accepted part of life. I would say the major difference is I'm more adept at figuring it out now that I know the general idea of like what UWO is, what the campus feels like, what the different types of spaces on campus feel like. So I think it's more, I'm just more comfortable than I was when I first got at UWO.
Right. Very good.
That makes sense. I'm curious, of the spaces you were talking about, you didn't talk about the classroom. Do you do the same type of code switching in classes?
I definitely do. It's kind of hard to talk about because I have a love-hate relationship with the classroom setting, simply because there are classes that I have enjoyed immensely. However, when they're classes that are more centered around Latinx or um, Hispanic history, Native history, um, I struggled more in those classes, I think, because I am educated in those issues from being a part of that group. And as I had mentioned, it is really hard to watch all of, I shouldn't say all of, but the majority of the white students are learning this information for the first time. And I have grown up knowing it, and I almost become like the ambassador for my people. And it can get really emotionally taxing, and that brings me to a point where I don't even get to enjoy the class, or I'll get so frustrated that I have to like mentally check out in the middle of the class just to get through sitting there. um like I'm actually more grateful for the virtual classes, because I've had moments where, had my mic not been muted and my camera not been off, the entire class would have seen me shout, "That is so racist," at a student's comment on a discussion that we were having about Indigenous people and their first reaction to seeing settlers come in. And in that sense, I'm grateful that it's virtual, because I get to be less physically present in the battlefield, so to say. Um, but it makes it really hard to want to be in these classes. But that's what I wanted my degree to be in, because that's what I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about teaching, about my people and the issues that we were facing and decolonizing the culture and all of that. But because the school is just so white centered, it turns that classroom from something I love and something I'm very passionate about to just something where I've had moments where I'm like, I wish I wasn't Hispanic, so that I didn't have to sit through listening to these students say these things still, because they were failed in public school before college. Because I mean, I grew up being taught that the Tainos were extinct, and I was like, I'm right here. Like, so it's it's definitely a love-hate relationship with the classroom settings. The classrooms that I've enjoyed the most were history classes, but had nothing to do with any of my personal identities, because I didn't have to fight with people, and that was actually information I was truly learning for the first time. So I was able to just be more of a sponge and soak it up and all of that without having that, like, okay, the teacher explained this wrong, or the student's reaction to this is problematic. Like, just, I don't really know how to explain it better than that, other than it's just frustrating. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought you explained it well. So, in navigating campus, do you remember times that you were surprised by what you encountered, either pleasantly or unfortunately?
I had a situation. I lived on the rainbow floor on campus, and I ended up moving off of the floor because of a situation I won't get into further detail just because it is triggering for some people. But I moved off the floor for my safety. And I specifically chose a floor out in the general population where my CA would be a part of the queer community because I am non-binary. So of course, moving off of a queer friendly space, I wanted to make sure I still had a feeling of that safety. And because I'm not binary, they actually ended up moving me onto the guys' side. And I'm an AFAB individual. So I was really surprised when my queer CA had sent out an email misgendering me and telling all of the guys on the floor that a girl would be living on their side. So a queer CA that had been trained and I thought was a safe person ended up doing like one of the most transphobic things you can possibly do to one of your own residents. And that really hurt. And that actually damaged my friendship with that CA. And I kind of didn't even feel safe on that floor anymore. Thankfully, the guys on the floor were super understanding and they were like, oh, okay, you're not a girl. And like a lot of them asked me questions and I did end up feeling safe, but not for my CA. I felt safe because of the guys on the floor. And it should never be like that, especially given that that specific floor was picked for me because of his identity. So UWO, as progressive as it is, still has a lot to do as far as training, because that should not be happening. That would be something I would expect from a cis hetero CA, not a queer CA at all.
Yeah, clearly there's a lot of gaps and a lot of areas that need to be touched upon in our institution when it comes to these matters.
We're currently safe training the CAs last week and this week. And so again, we'll emphasize that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, actually kind of touching on transphobia, is that is an aspect of Latinx culture that has been ingrained into the culture. And so navigating even Latinx spaces as a trans person has been hard, because our people are still working on decolonizing the culture. And it's because colonization, the people who colonizes brought over that gender binary. And the way that they introduced their culture to us was conform or die. And so we had to embrace that transphobia. We had to forget that, Latinx culture celebrates trans people, celebrates Two-Spirit, our Dine, our non-binary ancestors. And so that issue becomes not even just a white issue, that is a Latinx issue, because sometimes in even Latin spaces, I find people making comments like that, or even not even in Latin spaces, like other color spaces, Asian groups. There are, there's Black trans people on campus. And I think we can all agree that a lot of these issues overlap. So this issue is not a race issue per se.
So what do you think are the most important things for Latinx and or Hispanic queer trans students to know when trying to navigate Oshkosh? Are there things that you wished you know before you had gotten to campus?
I would want to tell those people that there are Latinx people there. There are Latinx people who are queer there. Yes, it's a little hard to find them and you have to look for them. And it's almost like once you find a few, you find all 5 of us and that's it. But the more of us that come here, the greater our space is going to be. And the more we can facilitate conversations like this so that we can make these issues better. And I know it sucks being, part of the first groups to come over because we end up having to do a lot of the emotional labor. But something that one of my good friends who is also Latinx and queer tells me a lot is you do the work so those who come after you don't have to. And that is something that I've struggled with because I get burnt out. I get exhausted, from fighting in these classes and just trying to find these spaces where, both my Latinx and my queer side are welcome. But like something I had actually in the email I sent Liz last night when A asked me if I was okay being the only panel member, if not me, then who? And when you come to UWO, it's going to be hard. You're going to think that there's no one like you here. There is. And it's going to suck because you might feel alone and you might feel like you're doing so much and you're not getting anywhere. But the ones who will come after us are going to reap those benefits. And on the flip side, changing from, thinking about future students to the past, our ancestors would be so proud that we even get to do this. So, like, I have ancestors that were in the reform schools, and we didn't even get to keep our culture. So now, not only am I in college learning about it, but teaching about it, having opportunities where, I'm coming onto a panel, I'm being celebrated for everything that I am. So I think as long as we remember what we're doing this for and focus on that, it can help us through those burnouts because it's going to be hard. But it is worth it. And I think finding those little spaces where, like, they're little now, but they'll be bigger eventually. But finding those little spaces, like, I have found some of my best friends. I have found someone who I consider a brother. And I wish I could just take every single person who is queer and Latinx and wants to come to this school, and I wish I could just like package up those little feelings and send it to them, just so they know that it's gonna be okay.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, yeah. And believe me, Byron and I are so aware of the emotional toll this kind of work does.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you do for self-care?
I honestly, I pray to my ancestors. I think about my family. I think about my children. I don't have any children, but I think about the world I would want for them. Even if I never have kids, I just think about the world I want the younger people to get through. If I need to vent, I have friends that I just vent to. Like I said, I found someone I consider a brother, and I love him to the moon and back, and we can just scream at each other all day, the frustrations, just to get it out and off of our chest, because yes, we should be fighting some, but we shouldn't just be uh, completely angry and taking it out on everyone that, is ignorant, because yes, they're ignorant, but some of it's not even their fault. Like I said, the public school system before they got to college failed them too. So, and it's hard to, go out and try to learn what you don't know, you don't even know. Um, so as much as I do get frustrated at some of my students or fellow students who say some of the most racist, ignorant things I've ever heard, I try to just remember, they weren't given the same education that I was given by my family and by my community. Um, so I do try and just figure out other ways to take that frustration other than just like aiming it at these white kids. Um, so,
Nicely
and
said.
I listen to a lot of Selena. Whenever I'm angry, I dive into just feeling super Latin and just dancing with Selena.
Yeah, I think you made a great point earlier with, I think, if we had more opportunities to celebrate one another, I think celebration was the word you used. I think through that you could educate. Sometimes we try to go straight to like, well, no, you're doing it wrong. You need to do this. We go straight to the education. I think sometimes if maybe if we just celebrate each other more through those
Yeah,
outlets and through those events or programs, whatever they might look like, you're going to get educated. And then also in that same vein, you might make a new friend. As kind of cheesy as that sounds, it's the reality of it.
yeah, I think that is something that once we're able to get past, the white students learning some of what we would consider basic knowledge at this point, we're able to have these conversations. And I think something that UWO could really benefit from is the Latinx groups communicating more with the Black Student Union and the Indigenous students, because Latinx culture is this kind of trifecta of, Spanish colonization, the African slaves that were brought through most of Central and South America, and the indigenous people that were there. So coming from a culture, specifically, I'm Puerto Rican, so we celebrate being mixed. Um, and at UWO, I see a lot of separation of that. And I think if we celebrated the mixture that is, we could all, it sounds cliche, but band together and actually talk about issues in more than just Black spaces. Like, I think Black issues should be taught in Latinx spaces and Asian spaces. Just kind of communicating with the other student groups on campus, because if all of us are talking about it and all of us are celebrating it, then I think we can do a lot more. And being from Latinx culture, I've been raised that it's all a part of it. So yeah.
Really good advice. Yeah. Yeah. I was also struck when you were talking about what to tell future students is that you basically said, yes, you can come to Oshkosh.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there are things that Oshkosh needs to improve on, address, look at, celebrate,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems that there's something here you think is definitely worthwhile to come for.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've gotten to explore myself more here. I mean, I became a drag performer here. That's something I'm extremely proud of. I've been a part of a dance group on campus that was primarily with Asian students. So I've gotten to get to know a lot of people. And really, it's the community that I would say draws me to UW Oshkosh. The reason I'm not currently a student is something else I wanted to bring up. They didn't cut the Latin Studies program, but they never replaced the professor who taught those classes when he retired. So even though the program is offered at UWO, you can't even take any of the classes to complete that. So until we find a professor who is able to teach those classes, I can't even finish my degree. So I am currently working with Carlos over he does the Student Org of Latinos. He works with the Center for Latins. I'm not sure the title. I'm so sorry. But
He's working on the title.
yeah. So I am working with him to try and figure out a way to get this program like actually truly up and running, because I don't have the money to be kind of just twiddling my thumbs at UWO in the meantime. So once UWO kind of brings that program back in full force, I will be coming back to finish my degree, which kind of sucks because, you know, that's setting me back and setting other people back and not allowing people to have this. Like, that's the whole reason I went to UWO, is they had the Latin American Studies program. And I can't do anything until, like, it's not even, like, I don't know what more I can do other than just wait and try and do my best and, you know, do panels like these and talk about issues like that. And by the time I get back, though, all of my friends will have graduated. So that kind of sucks, because that, as I said, my community is the whole reason I love UWO so much. But I'm hoping that being in panels like this and, you know, it'll bring in more students like me and, you know, make these spaces that, you know, I've fought so hard to find just a little bit bigger so they are easier to find.
Wonderful. And I know there are some people on this call that will hear that, the need for the Latinx Studies program to be reinvigorated and come back.
Yeah. The way it was explained to me was it kind of just fell through the cracks because UWO was working really hard on getting the Hmong American Studies program up and running, which I'm super happy for. I'm super grateful. Like, that is definitely something. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like I kind of just sat down and I was like, UWO, we can learn about more than one people of color at a time. Like, we need to be able to focus on all of these and not just so as much as I was grateful for, you know, the new program, I was like, oh, at the cost of mine. Cool.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah, it hinders your track to graduation. I mean, that's clearly a problem.
I was a junior, and for those of you who don't know, I've had 6 surgeries in the past 2 years. So I have fought really hard to continue to be doing that through school. I had a year ago, I had a surgery during midterms and then another surgery during finals. So for me to have fought so hard to finish this degree just for them to kind of take away my whole program, I was like, well, shit, I could have, you know, relaxed a bit and taken my time and not stress so much, because going through cyborg surgeries is what they were. I have an electric implant in my back now. That was not easy to be trying to study through painkillers making me super groggy and just pain in general and all of that. So that kind of felt like a slap to the face. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, we hear you. Yeah. Is there anything else about your journey that you want to share?
You've given us great stuff so far.
Oh, yeah.
Unfortunately, I thought I was going to be able to get my computer up. I had my notes on my phone. So I talked about the CA, talked about the program. That's kind of all of the big things I wanted to bring up and make sure were talked about. As I said, I can't really go further into the racial situations on campus. I know they need to be better. I know there have been situations where like slurs have been written across doors of Black students. I know that things need to be better, but because I don't experience that, like to the extent where I would actually know what's going on, I feel like I really wish that there was someone here who was Afro-Latinx who could give you more of that information that desperately needs to be talked about. Um, so I'm really sorry that, we can't facilitate that conversation, but that's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. And, as more students come in, we need to keep having these conversations.
Yes.
So.
And I will say real quickly that and this isn't in defense or anything, just these are the facts, that the institution is working on, currently working on efforts to increase faculty and staff of color. And we recently administered a diversity mandatory training for all staff. And so there's these little victories, but clearly there's a lot more that needs to be done. You just hope the institution is moving in the right direction, which I think we are.
Yeah, and Liz, you would ask me kind of what draws me to UWO. That specifically right there is what does it as well, is under like the institution, mainly being the faculty, the administration, they know they have work to do. They know that they need to fix certain things, they need to figure out what students need, and they're working on it. Are the changes made going to be super quick and easy? No, but I can respect an institution still having work to do as long as they know about it and are doing something. And even as a student, I've seen, there are more teachers who are of color. There are more teachers who are learning as they go. I actually had Gabriel Loacono. I am not 100% certain how to pronounce his name. We just call him Gabe. He actually, during his classes where he's teaching about Indigenous history, he is allowed me and a few other Indigenous students to kind of take the reins and let them know, like, hey, this term is not okay, or hey, the way you said this is not right, or the teachers just being open to feedback from students of color is a huge step, because even if the administration is working on these issues, it's really the teachers that are going to have to facilitate it in their own classrooms. And like I said, I had a situation where I'm thankful I was muted because I literally screamed, "That's racist." And while I was trying to collect myself, Gabe actually said, "Hey, actually," and then explained to that student why it was wrong. And so I kind of was able to calm down and kind of chime in and explain. It was about the boats. The student had said something about how the natives must have been so in awe by the boats that the Spanish brought. And Gabe was like, actually, the idea that the indigenous people were like amazed or just so wowed by these settlers is racist in origin, because they had their own technologies, they had all of these things. It was more, all right, what are these white people, what are they doing? And then I chimed in, I was like, hey, just so you know, you have the word canoe from Taino native language, because we made canoes. So the idea that we are impressed by white people's boats is just a little racist in origin, because settlers were not heroes to us. So just situations like that, it is frustrating to still have those happen, but seeing the teachers at least be aware that it's not okay and aware and just outright saying, you know what, we have more to do on this. That is something that I love UWO for, because even as much as, it's still frustrating that these situations are still happening, I know, as I said, future students are not going to have to deal with this because of the work that we're doing now.
And just as another quick disclaimer, this is for you and for any other students listening, that if you do have any situations of that nature, there's always the racial bias incidents reports that you can fill out through the Dean of Students office. Because the more we report, the more things will get done. So highly encourage that.
I second that. And it doesn't go into a vacuum that nobody sees, believe me. There is a committee who looks at those and actually does things about them. So thank you to all students who've done it and know that it's there to do.
And they're anonymous, which is a big part.
Yeah.
Cool. I'm curious if there are any questions from our audience members. You can shout them out, raise your hand, we'll call on you, write them in the chat. We've gotten a lot of really good ideas here, and I'm wondering what people who are listening are thinking.
Liz, I don't have access to the chat. I wonder if that's just me or is it everyone?
I had to pull it up on my phone, which is why I started looking at my phone. It's fascinating to me. Sometimes I have chat on my laptop with Teams, and sometimes I don't. Brooke said that they had Dr. L in undergrad, and he is great. So there was a comment in the chat about that. And someone else did as well.
Yeah, he does a lot of the early U.S. history classes, which kind of ended up also being Indigenous history as well. And yeah.
Cool. We will definitely pass on the kudos to him.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. Anybody else have questions for Letty? Someone is typing. Wonderful. We'll have a kitty break.
Yes.
As the questions come in. A genuine thank you for taking the time to be here today. Wonderful. Wonderful. All right. Well, I think we are not getting questions. Anything else, Byron, Letty?
No,
I think you managed to cover everything that I did want to bring up. So.
Wonderful. I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. It's been a really, really good conversation, and I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. So thank you for your time, your emotional labor, and it's just good to see you. So
yeah, I miss you. And April's coming up, and I'm so used to getting ready for the drag show that I don't know what to do with myself.
I know.
But hopefully we'll be able to do that again. And I suppose the silver lining to me having to wait to finish my degree is that my career at UWO will be a little bit longer for that.
For us, that is a wonderful thing. So
I know, definitely. Actually, truly, that was the first time Chancellor Leavitt saw me. was my very first drag performance.
Mhm.
And I do want to bring up, he is such a huge force at all of the progress that UWO is making. I remember, gosh, what was it, 2 years ago? I sat outside the Polk Library when we had those preachers just shouting that all gay people are going to hell, and I sat outside with my flag, and Chancellor Leavitt sat down and, signed my flag too with everyone else and let us know that we were totally okay to sit there and silently protest. And so I'm very excited to continue to entertain all these people that do care and do want to see the progress. And especially with all my surgeries, my leg is doing so much better. So I'm very excited to see what else I can come up with for drag shows. And honestly, that's one of my favorite things about UWO, is that it births that. But yeah.
And we can't wait to see you in your next drag performance. Something for
Guys,
all of us to look forward to.
yes. So yeah, hopefully everyone stays safe, stays up to date, takes care of themselves. I know a lot of us are doing a lot of extra work on top of already emotionally taxing work. So I appreciate both of you for putting this panel together and still making sure it happens, even with being virtually and all the technical difficulties. I know it's not easy, but I appreciate it, and I'm really excited to see what we can do with this.
Thank you for your
Thank
voice.
you.
Yes.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who came to the panel. And hopefully you'll join us in April for our panel where we will be raising Hmong and Asian voices. Thank you, everybody.